in Mexico. And yes, we can start now. As I was saying, my name is Jorge Reyes, and today I'm joined with an Education USA team that is just backstage helping us out with everything. And of course, we have some panelists, some guests from several universities in the States. So you're going to be muted, and we require from you to turn your cameras off. I guess you cannot turn them on, just as an advice. My peer Alfredo Ornelas, he will be in charge of the Q&A section, so you can direct all your questions to him through the chat box. And yeah, we can start. Please, next slide. Thanks a lot. And today we are going to talk about understanding testing policies in undergraduate admissions. As you know, the pandemic has been changing all the process that universities used to do this, the admission process and all that. So we're just going to view a review with our panelists regarding the testing policies that some universities are running nowadays. Can we go to the next one, please? Before we start, I would like to ask from you, where are you joining us from? Where are you joining us from? Maybe I think you can see already the poll. Alfredo is helping us with that, and Alfredo will be delivering the answer. Where do we have the most people from? I don't know, Alfredo, do we have an answer already?
Sorry, I was muted. Okay, 82% of our attendants are from Central America. And we have a tie with 9% from the Caribbean and 9% from Mexico.
Okay, great. Thanks again for attending to this session. And yeah, just before we start with the questions and all that, can we go to the next slide, please? Thank you. For those folks that this is the first time on a Education USA webinar, I just want to comment that Education USA is a global network of advising centers from the U.S. State Department Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. We provide services that will help students to achieve their dream to study a higher education in the States. And since we are not an institution, but we cannot do agreements directly with institutions as the universities, but we can provide a general perspective from the education system in the United States. So with this, that gives us the opportunity to work with the more than 4,700 universities from the States. And as an example of that is that today we are joined from representatives from different universities. All the services that we provide are for free. And as you know, since the pandemic started, all our services became online. And there are some advisors maybe in Mexico or maybe in another parts of of America, let's say Canada, Central America, or the Caribbean, that they have already opened their doors. But if you want a personalized advising session, you may have to contact each. Where are you from? And you have to find your nearest advising center. And as you can see at the bottom of this slide, you can find the website, the official website of the Education USA, and then you can find your nearest advising center. And yeah, as part of the services that we provide is that we deliver information. And in this occasion, we are joined joined with 4 representatives from universities from the States. And it is my pleasure to introduce our first panelist, which is Tanya Barajas. Tanya Barajas has been sharing the Binghamton University Impact, Premier Academics, Distinctive Undergraduate Research Programs, robust study abroad options, engaging service learning opportunities, and award-winning professional development. With students since 2018, she aims to help students find the right fit and empower students, families, and school advisors with the resources needed to make informed decisions. Outside of her work as a counselor, Tanya enjoys spending time with her husband and their dog, and is an amateur humorist. Her husband says he likes her jokes, and the dog doesn't find them funny at all. Well, she's excited to meet you. She looks forward to providing you with personalized attention throughout the admission experience. And she's representing Binghamton University. So Tanya, thanks a lot for being here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Saludos, bienvenidos a todos. I'm glad to be here and be a part of this session with you all.
Okay, next we have Vera. He's the Senior Assistant Director of International Admissions at Worcester Polytechnic Institute. She is a first-generation American and is trilingual, speaking English, Serbian, and Spanish. This is her 6th year at WPI, and she works with all the applicants from the Americas as well as Africa and Oceania. Aside from her work with international students, she also coordinates the partnerships with various robotics organizations, including FIRST and VEX, or VEX, I assume, right, Vera?
Yes, thank you everyone for attending today. It's very nice to meet you all. You do not need to attempt to say the school name. You can just call it WPI and it will be easier for all of us. But it is pronounced Worcester Polytechnic Institute. I know that's a difficult one to say.
Thanks a lot, Vera. Next, we have Caitlin Livingston. Is a proud two-time University of Pittsburgh alumni with a Master of Education in Foreign Language Education. Her study abroad experiences in Brazil and Bolivia sparked her passion for international education. And she is also a Fulbright scholar who served as an English teaching assistant in Brazil. Caitlin has been working in education for over 4 years and currently serves as an enrollment services manager at the University of Pittsburgh. As Pitt's admissions counselor for Latin America and the Caribbean, Caitlin strives to help students meet their educational goals for studying at one of the top public universities in the United States. She loves connecting with families from around the world and welcoming new students to the Pitt family. And she is representing the University of Pittsburgh.
Thank you so much for having me. Welcome, students. I'm excited to meet you all today.
And last but not least, we have Rachel Scholten. Is the Director of International Admission at Loyola University, Maryland. Mrs. Scholten is an experienced international enrollment management professional, passionate about helping international students understand and access U.S. higher education. Mrs. Scholten holds a master's degree in international development and a bachelor degree in sociology, and during her time as a student spent 2 semesters abroad. Her time studying in new countries in a second language solidified her belief in the value of international education and continues to inform her work with international students, parents, and counselors. So thank you very much, Rachel, for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Jorge. Welcome to all the students. I'm looking forward to chatting with you today about U.S. testing policies.
Okay, so now we can get right into it. And we have the first question. And the first question goes to Rachel. So Rachel can give us a general perspective of what does test flexible, test optional, and test blind mean?
Certainly. So I'll start with test flexible because I do think that it's the most complex. Basically, if a university has a test flexible admission policy, it means that the school does require some type of standardized examination, but it doesn't have to be the SAT or the ACT exam. It can be one of several different options that the student can choose between. The most important thing to keep in mind about a test flexible policy is that different universities and colleges will have different options for the test flexible options. So you can't look at one school and say, okay, well, this school accepts these 4 exams. So it'll be the same at every school that I'm looking at. A common thing that you'll hear as you're exploring the application process for U.S. higher education is that it's very decentralized. So every individual institution makes their own policies and has their own requirements. So the process can be very different at different schools, even if they're schools within the same location, the same city or state, even if they're schools that are related to one another in some way. Different branch campuses can have different policies for main campuses. So very important to keep in mind, test flexible means that you do need to take some standardized exam, but it doesn't have to be the SAT or ACT, and the policies will vary between institutions. So to give you a couple of examples, New York University, NYU, they have a test flexible policy. They do accept SAT scores or ACT scores, or students could submit 3 advanced placement exams, or they could submit 3 international baccalaureate exams, or they also accept certain international examinations like the British A-levels. So in that case, a student who's already studying in the British curriculum and knows that they will have A-levels to send in, they know already that when they apply, they don't need to send SAT or ACT because NYU will exempt them from that requirement based on their British A-levels. Alternatively, St. Mary's College in Indiana, they also have a test flexible policy, but they only accept 1 of 5 examinations. And theirs is a little unique because they actually combined SAT, ACT with test of English. So at St. Mary's College, they would accept either TOEFL, IELTS, Duolingo, SAT, or ACT. So students just have to choose 1 of those exams, and as long as they send 1 in, they don't have to send any of the others. Now, it is important to keep in mind that most frequently, English proficiency requirements are separate from SAT, ACT requirements. So you should not assume that schools that have test flexible policies will exempt you from a test of English. Okay, so those are typically separate things. So we can jump into test optional now. This one's a little bit less complex. Test optional essentially just means that the school will allow the applicant to decide whether or not to send SAT, ACT scores. You can decide whether to send it as part of your application file if you've already taken one of the exams and you did very well. You want that to be a component of the application when the school is reviewing it. You can send them and they will consider it. If you don't like your SAT or ACT score, you don't think that it's a strong representation of your academic background, or if you don't want to take the test at all, or like this past year and a half, if you simply didn't have access to exam centers due to COVID-19, test optional schools allow applicants to apply with no SAT or ACT scores, and they'll still be considered for admission. And again, just want to point out that doesn't mean that a test of English is optional. So test optional refers specifically to SAT, ACT exams. And then test blind means that the college or university has decided that they do not want to consider SAT or ACT scores in the admission process at all for any student. So that means even if a student has a great score and they send it in and they want it to be considered, that school will not consider it as part of the application review process. So test flexible, students do need to take an exam, but it doesn't have to be SAT or ACT. It needs to be one of the designated exams at the institution where they are applying. Test optional means the student can decide whether or not to send in SAT or ACT scores. And test blind means that the college or university will not consider an SAT or ACT score in the review process at all.
Okay, so the main recommendation will be for the students to get to know the right university that they would like to submit an application, right? And then from here, they could know what they must expect in order to, considering the requirements, right?
Yes, absolutely. So you'll want to do your research once you've identified the schools you're interested in. Make sure you understand what their SAT, ACT policy is and how you can meet that policy, whether you're able to opt out of sending the scores at a test optional institution, whether the school won't consider them at all if it is a test blind school, or whether you can fulfill that testing requirement with an exam other than the SAT or ACT.
Okay. Great. Can we go to the next question, please? Okay. What are the current testing policies at your institution? Did they change due to COVID-19? Would you expect adjustments in the future? And this question goes for all of you. So I can start with Tanya.
Hi. So Binghamton University historically did require the SAT and the ACT. It has since moved to a test optional policy with regards to SAT and ACT. So students can choose to either submit their SAT or ACT scores or to not submit those scores. That is going to remain in effect for fall 22 and for spring 2023. The future after that is unknown. So I think that the university is going to assess admissions after that time before they make any further decisions to either extend it or to bring back that requirement. And I can also add that in the chat box too.
Great. Can we move forward with Vera?
Yes, so WPI is test blind, meaning we do not accept any SAT or ACT scores in our process. So the history here is 15 years ago, WPI became the first nationally recognized STEM university in the United States to move to test optional. So 14 years ago, they went test optional. And then after a trial period there, the faculty voted last year to accept test blind, meaning that they saw that the quality of the student was just as good as when we accepted the scores. The graduation rates were still very high. So they are trusting admissions to say that this isn't something that is affecting our students. Our students are awesome, whether or not they have a score. So let's just cancel the scores for everyone. So now moving forward, this is our first year where we are test blind. So we made the change. It was up for debate anyway. And then I think with COVID, they really wanted to make sure that students weren't going to have to sit in testing centers where they would be exposed to the disease or to the virus. They wouldn't want students to have to pay an additional fee for all of these things. So we moved to test blind, and we will be this way for many years. And then we have a kind of stopgap scheduled in the future to assess how the university is doing with the test blind policy to see whether or not it will stick even further. So we are pretty excited about this test blind pilot this year, and I will put it in the chat as well.
Thanks a lot, Vera. And then we can move with Caitlin.
Yeah, so the University of Pittsburgh's policy is similar to Binghamton. So we were test flexible prior to COVID. So we accepted SAT or ACT or both. Students could submit both if they wanted to, and we would always take their higher score. But now, as of last year, we are test optional. So we don't require the SAT or ACT anymore, and we are going to remain test optional through at least the fall 2023 application cycle. So we've sort of got a 2-year window right now that we're working with the test optional policy, and then we're going to reevaluate in the future just to make sure that we're still seeing those positive outcomes from our students who are coming to campus with or without test scores. We do anticipate that will happen. So my personal hope is that we continue to be test optional long into the future, but that is yet to be decided. And I will also post our link in the chat too.
Thank you, Caitlin. And Rachel?
So Loyola University, Maryland has been test optional for more than a decade now. So we didn't have to make that change due to COVID-19. So that was a decision we had made years ago and that we are continuing with. Any adjustment in the future would be in the direction of test blind, but right now that's very hypothetical. So for this current application cycle, we're just continuing to be test optional, and then we would not move back to being SAT, ACT required. So if there's movement, it would be towards not accepting those tests anymore. But that is separate from our English language testing policy. So test optional for SAT, ACT, and we do require a test of English.
Okay, and in a way, I guess future is unknown, right? I mean, we didn't expect the pandemic to happen, and then we are still waiting on some other news, I guess, right? So again, students, do your research and just keep in mind that some universities may ask them or some may not. So just be aware of that. Okay, so can we go to the next one, please? Okay, so then if you do not ask for this test, if the test scores aren't included, how are applicants evaluated? Is it fair when institutions use tests for some applicants but not for others? And this question goes for Tanya.
Hi, Hi there. So at Binghamton University, we engage in what's called a holistic review process. And I think that's true of a lot of colleges and universities in the US. We're taking all parts of the application into consideration. And we are also looking at your academics, your academic records from grade 9, grade 10, and grade 11. Or if your school, if you graduate at grade 11, the prior 3 completed years. So we want to see all the classes that you've attended, and we want to see all the course, the grades that you've obtained, the marks that you've obtained, because we want to be sure that you'll be able to handle the academic rigor that's in our college classrooms, our university classrooms. But again, we're taking all parts of the application into consideration. Those numbers only tell us so much. That's why we also look at things like, activities and achievements that you have, your essays, your letter of recommendation. Other schools may have other requirements that they would like to look at. With the question, is it fair when institutions use tests for some applicants but not for others? So for Binghamton being an institution that's test optional, by submitting your scores, you're telling the committee, that you would like those scores to be considered. So you're making that choice for those scores to be considered. It's just one piece of data in the full application. And essentially you're saying, you will understand me better as a student by reviewing these scores when you make that selection. So for some students that may not be true. They might not be the best test takers, and that's okay. At Binghamton, where we are test optional, you can choose not to submit those scores. It is a perfectly reasonable and valid question when you're looking at colleges and universities to ask, not only do they accept scores and what their requirements are, but also how those scores will be used. And you can use that to inform your decision on whether you want to submit scores or not, or in some cases even apply if that particular institution requires them.
Okay, you said a very important word that we as Education USA advisors use a lot, is the holistic review, right? It's not only that recruiters will only see your academics or only your letters of recommendation. It's a whole pack, right? I mean, it's not only one thing that you guys will look at on the application. So it is very important to know that as well. Okay, can we move onto the other one? Okay, if I have access to a testing center, would you recommend me to complete the test? If I already have my scores, should I send them? Would that help or hurt my application? How do I know? And this one goes to Caitlin.
Yeah, thank you. So there's a lot to unpack here. So let's take it step by step. So the first question, if you have access to a testing center, should you take the test? I think the first and most important thing to ask yourself is, are you applying to any schools that require it or even give you the option to submit it? So this is where doing your research really comes in handy. You should do your research ahead of time, check the school's testing policies. Now, granted, some of those policies are changing pretty frequently due to COVID, but if you anticipate applying to any schools that might require a test score, or even that might be test optional, you may want to consider taking that test just to have it in case you end up needing it or wanting to submit it. Now, if you're only planning to apply to schools that don't require a score, there's a few questions that you can sort of ask yourself to help you decide if you really want to take the test or not. One of these questions, to tie into what Tanya was saying, is, are you a strong test taker? If you are a strong test taker, this can be something that could really boost your application and help as part of that holistic review. But if you know that you're not a good test taker, maybe you don't need to sign up to take the test. I would, in that case, focus more on the other parts of your application, your high school grades, your activities, your essays, and your letters of recommendation, things along those lines. Another important question to ask yourself is, are you willing to put in the time and effort to learn how to take the test? Because When you're taking the SAT, it's testing your English and your math skills, but it's not just about your English and math skills, right? You also need to learn test taking strategies. You need to learn how to take the SAT or the ACT, and that takes some time and effort. And so if you'd rather focus that energy on something else, that is perfectly fine. And then another thing to keep in mind is, will a test score perhaps help compensate for another piece of your application that might not be as strong? So, maybe you had a rough year or two in high school and your grades are just not as strong as you want them to be. If you do decide to take a test, that can really help to give the admissions committee a more well-rounded understanding of your academic abilities and potential, especially if you are a strong test taker. So I would keep all of these questions in mind when you're trying to decide if you want to take a test. So now let's address the next question. So if you have a test score, how do you know if you should submit it or not? Again, remember, the test score is just one data point within your whole application. So if you think your test score is strong and you feel good about it, you can always submit it. One way to sort of figure out if your test score might be, if it might be in your benefit to submit your test score to a particular school would be to check the class profiles of the universities that you're interested in. Most universities have a pretty clear-cut page on their website that will show the average or the middle 50% SAT or ACT scores from previous years. And so if you check that website, you can sort of see what the averages are. If your test scores fall within that range or they're even stronger than the average from the previous year, it's probably in your best interest to submit that score. If your score falls, more towards the lower end of the range or even a little bit below it, that might be a situation where you may not want to submit that test score, but that can sort of be a good guideline to help you figure that out. Another important question for you to ask is, even if a school is test optional, are they test optional for everything? So are they test optional for scholarships? Are they test optional for honors college or more competitive programs such as engineering or nursing? If you have a test score, you might want to submit it, especially if you're interested in applying to a more competitive program or one that might actually require a test score as well. So in general, I would say, if you're applying to a test optional school, it's ultimately your decision whether or not you want to submit that test score. If a school is test optional, whatever decision you make, it's not going to hurt your application. It's important that you yourself really evaluate your application as a whole. And if you decide not to submit a test score, maybe submit something else additional, some other supplemental information so that the admissions committee can get to know you a little bit better.
Thanks a lot, Caitlin. And remember, Education USA advisors are always eager to help students just to keep in mind these decisions, right? Can we go to the next question, please? Okay, and this goes for Vera. Can I still be a test optional applicant if I send my test scores accidentally? Or if I submit a test at first, but I want to switch to test optional later? What if I apply without test, but send them later?
So this is going to be one of those great answers where it starts off with, it depends. That is what we say a lot in admissions. So of course, every school is going to have their own policies, so it always depends. But what we try to keep in mind is that when you submit your application, so this could be on the common application, this could be coalition, this could be the specific one that the school has, we are taking everything that you write on that application as true. So that means on the application, you have to select whether or not you want to be test optional or not, for instance. So if you say, yes, I am not submitting scores, then we are going to assume you're not submitting scores. If you say on the application, yes, I am submitting scores, then you will keep getting reminders from the university that your application is incomplete until we receive those scores. So generally there is some flexibility until the deadline of that submission. So let's pretend that's November 1st or November 15th. Those are generally the earliest ones that if you decide before the deadline, oh no, actually I don't want to submit my scores, or you get your scores back and you say, oh yes, I want to submit them now. Usually there's some flexibility and you can make that change. It can be more difficult once the deadline passes. Of course, this is when you need to go on the website of the universities or just email the counselors directly. These universities, they seem like these big, scary entities far away. but we are the humans on the other side of those email addresses. And our job is to help you and to complete your application and to find the best fit university for you. So don't be scared to email us, because we want to make sure that everything that happens is in your best interest. So if you accidentally send your scores, but you have clicked test optional, at least what used to happen at our university is we would still say that you're test optional because that was on the common application. So we wouldn't automatically look at the scores just because, for instance, say your counselor sent them to us, didn't realize you were test optional. If it said on the common application you were test optional, then you were test optional. Or what if you wanted to submit scores and then later on, you had the testing center closed and you weren't able to take the scores, and all of a sudden you have no scores to submit. These are all reasons to email the university. So like I mentioned, it's usually that there's some flexibility before the deadline. It can be more difficult after that deadline has passed. So again, what if you apply without tests but send them later? This is where you should email the school. If you know that your deadline is November 15th, but you think your scores won't be released until November 26th, email the school and ask if that's okay. I know at our university, when we accepted scores, or we still need the TOEFL, the IELTS, or the Duolingo English score, that's okay. We can work with some wiggle room. We know that the test date is on one day and then weeks pass before you get the scores. They don't offer the test every single day. So there's a lot outside of your control. So again, just to sum it up, the best thing to do is just email the admissions department and work with them in your individual circumstance. Or, if something gets canceled, if there is a power outage, if there's a curfew in the city, we have now all learned that unpredictable things are happening every day. So just let us know, keep open lines of communication, but do your best to follow what you did on the common application. So if you said you were submitting testing, we are expecting it. But again, we know that things are out of our control these days.
Thanks a lot, Vera. Can we go to the next one, please? Okay, are test scores mandatory for competitive programs, or if I want to earn a scholarship? Okay, so this one goes for all of you, and I will start with Caitlin.
Yeah, so this is another it depends question. So I can tell you at Pitt, our policy is that we are test optional for everything. So we're actually test blind for scholarships. So even if you do submit a test score, that will be taken into consideration with your application review. We will not be looking at test scores for scholarship review. We're test optional for our honors college, as well as for our guaranteed admissions programs, where you can get a guaranteed seat into one of our 19 graduate school programs. So we really mean it when we're test optional. We are test optional for everything.
Okay, thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, so Loyola University, Maryland has a very similar policy. Every opportunity at the university that is open to prospective students is test optional. So that means admission, scholarships, financial aid, our honors program, and our scholars programs as well. So all of those can be applied for with no SAT or ACT score. Or again, the other side of test optional is choosing to send those scores. So if a student chooses to send in an SAT or ACT score, it would be used for any of those opportunities that the student wants to be considered for.
Thank you. Tanya?
Yes, my answer pretty much echoes what Caitlin and Rachel are saying. Binghamton University is a test optional university. SAT and ACT scores are not required for scholarship consideration or consideration for honors programs. So we can still deliver an admissions decision as well as a scholarship decision without the SAT or ACT. However, if you do select to submit the SAT or ACT, we're going to consider it as part of your total application for all those areas, for admission, for scholarship, and honors programs.
Okay, thank you. Vera?
As WPI is ACT, SAT blind, that means that if we don't ever receive your scores, so we cannot use them for any programs or scholarships. So it has no impact whatsoever because we'll never see them.
Okay, thank you. And I think we have one more question. Okay, yeah, well, final thoughts, tips, and recommendations. And of course, this is all of you participating as well. So I will start with Vera.
Stay organized during this process. We all have our own unique policies and quirks when it comes to admission. So one of the best pieces of advice I can give is to open either Google Sheets or Excel and just make sure that everything is organized for all of the universities that you are interested in. So that way, if somebody is test optional, maybe it's a test score or you have to write an essay, make sure you remember that about that school. You don't ever want to lose out on admission or a scholarship policy because of one particular school's nuances, because we all have our own nuances. So stay organized and always email the counselor if you have questions. My favorite part of the day is interacting with students, so I love receiving emails from all of our applicants.
Thank you. Tanya?
Hi, just to also piggyback on something that Vera had said earlier, we are here to answer your questions. So feel free to email us at any point in the process, and take your time, work on your application in pieces. It is a collaborative effort. You're going to involve your families and sometimes your teachers or other school administrators, maybe a psychologist or a college guidance counselor that you may have at your school. So it is a group effort. So feel free to take it in pieces and to send us those emails along the way if you have any questions.
Thanks. Rachel?
Sure. So I'll mention something that Caitlin actually referred to earlier. Typically, it's called an applicant profile or an admitted student profile. Many universities do publish either their average SAT, ACT scores or a range of the middle 50%. So ranging from the 25th percentile up through the 75th percentile. And that helps you kind of understand the profile of a successful applicant to that university. For the students that were choosing to send scores, if it's a test optional school, that can help inform your decision about whether or not your score is an impressive score at that university compared to their applicant pool or their admitted student pool, or whether that score is on the lower range and maybe you want to choose not to submit it. And if you're not able to find that section of the website, most of that data comes from what's called the common data set. And you can actually go into that. If you search that on a school's website, it is a lot of data. You'll have to really pick through it. But you can go into that kind of raw data almost and find that information yourself if you're not able to find it quickly on the website. And to reiterate what everyone else has said, you can also just ask the school directly. Again, people that work in admission offices, we love talking to students. It is our job to help you understand what the requirements are, what the process is, and to really make sure that you know what is expected of you as an applicant to the university.
Great. Thanks a lot, Rachel. And Caitlin, please.
Yeah, I agree with everything my colleagues have said. I would say try not to stress too much. I know it can be a little bit of a stressful process trying to figure out if you should take the test and then if you should submit it. But we are all here to help you. And so keep that in mind. And also just remember to focus on the other pieces of your application as well. If you think about your application as a big pie, the test score is just one piece of that pie. If you even choose to submit it, there's a lot of other things that you can do to sort of fill in that pie with essays or supplemental materials that can ultimately help us get to know you better than a test score might. So don't stress too much, and please reach out if you ever need any help.
Okay, and once again, remember that Education USA advisors are always here to help you as well. So can we move to the next slide, please? For this next section, you guys can introduce your institutions. And I think we will start with, Binghamton.
Hi, thanks. So Binghamton University is known as the #1 public research university in the state of New York. Our mid-sized residential campus offers ample opportunities for research, internships, service learning experiences, and study abroad. The campus is located in the suburb of Binghamton, New York, which is about 3 hours northwest from New York City in what's known as the Southern Tier region of New York State. Students can choose from 130 different majors and minors. Popular majors include business administration, accounting, engineering, computer science, economics, psychology, mathematics, biology, integrative neuroscience, English, environmental studies, just to name a few. Binghamton is committed to environmental sustainability. That's a big part of our campus identity. The largest and best used laboratory on our campus is the Nature Preserve, which encompasses about 182 acres of natural land, including a 20-acre wetland. We offer a lot of high value with several accelerated degree programs that allow students to earn 2 degrees, a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in 5 years instead of 6. We also allow students to transfer in up to a full years of university credit with high-level exam scores and AP, IB, and A-level, so that's Cambridge. And we also offer scholarships for international students. So thank you so much for giving me some time to talk about Binghamton. I'd be happy to share a version of our digital brochure today as well.
Thank you very much. Moving on with Rachel.
So Loyola University, Maryland is a small to mid-sized university located in Baltimore, Maryland. So Baltimore is just in between Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. So we're kind of right in a line with all of the major East Coast cities. It's a really great location. We have just under 4,000 undergraduate students and about 2,000 graduate students. One of the things that sets us apart is our very low student to faculty ratio, 12:1. So that allows us to keep our class sizes very small. Most classes are between 15 and 20 students. And that tends to get even smaller as students reach the higher levels in their 3rd and 4th years. So we have a very individualized style of education, and there's a lot of flexibility in the curriculum for students to really kind of explore different academic disciplines and kind of choose their own educational pathway. We do have 18 different NCAA Division I sports teams, so for men and women. So there is some opportunity for athletic scholarships in addition to the merit scholarships that we offer. And we are a very traditional residential campus. So over 82% of our students choose to live on campus all 4 years, even though that's not required. So that creates a really vibrant campus community. You know, the campus is not just a place where people study and then they come for class and they leave and it's a ghost town in the evenings. It really is a home for our students as well as being the place where they learn. More than 40 nationalities are represented at the undergraduate level, despite our smaller size. And we actually have a 98% placement rate for graduating students. So we're very proud of that. The point of university is not only those 4 years that you're studying, it really is to help you reach that next step, whether that means graduate studies, you know, further studies in your field, or whether that means getting that first job after graduation. We do consider all international students automatically with the same information they submit with their application for academic merit scholarships that range all the way up to $35,000 per year, as well as limited need-based financial aid. So that's definitely something to keep in mind as you're looking at different schools. What type of financial aid would you need when you're thinking about studies? What can you do through family funding, and kind of what plans you're making for meeting those costs, whether that's through family funding, external funding, scholarships, financial aid, something to keep in mind. And then we do have a lot of virtual programming that is still available this semester. So if you want to follow this link, loyola.edu/visit. We have virtual tours, we have brochures you can download, we have information on live sessions with current student panels, with different faculty members to explore our different academic programs, and a lot of other information. So I encourage you to check that out.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. Now we'll go with Caitlin.
Thank you, Jorge. So the University of Pittsburgh is located in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which is in the northeastern part of the US, but sort of on the border with the Midwest. We're considered a mid to large size public university. So we have about 20,000 undergraduate students on our campus. And we are consistently ranked in the top 20 public universities in the United States and #1 in the Northeast. When it comes to academics, we offer over 100 different majors in 11 different undergraduate schools, including a brand new undergraduate program in public health, which we're very excited about. We're particularly well known for our health sciences, business, and engineering programs, but we do also have a very robust arts and sciences program with over 60 majors. For those students who are interested in health sciences, we actually have 5 teaching hospitals right on our campus where our students can do clinicals and internships and research. And speaking of research, we're also a Research One institution. So we have research going on in every single department on campus, if that's something you're interested in. Outside of the classroom, the city of Pittsburgh has been ranked as one of the most livable cities in the US. It's very safe and there's a low cost of living. And there's also a lot to do. We actually have over 400 student organizations. So there's something for everybody here. And it's also really easy for our students to get experiential learning opportunities such as co-ops or internships. There's a lot of great companies that have offices here in Pittsburgh, including Google, Duolingo, American Eagle, Amazon, Uber, and several others as well. And our campus is also home to the Cathedral of Learning, which you can see in the photo there. It's the tallest academic building in the Western Hemisphere. From an admissions perspective, we have rolling admissions. So applying early is key to the application process as well as the scholarship process. We do offer merit-based scholarships for international students. We also offer guaranteed admission into 19 of our graduate school programs, including our MBA program and our School of Law. And you already know this, but we're test optional through at least fall 2023. And if any of you have any questions, please feel free to contact me directly. I'm always happy to help with that.
Great, go Steelers. And finally, Vera, please.
You're going to say go Steelers right before somebody from New England presents, home of the Patriots.
Sorry about that.
It's okay, I forgive you. So I'll put my information in the chat here while I start to talk. So again, I am from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. This is a STEM plus business university in Massachusetts. So science, technology, engineering, math, and business, though we do have offerings within the humanities and arts as well. We are 1 hour from Boston in a city called Worcester. It is the second largest city of New England. So New England is the grouping of states in the northeast of the United States, right next to New York State. We're about 4,700 undergraduate students, about 2,000 graduate students, and we are 9% international at the undergraduate level. Though a lot of people tend to think that STEM is something for male students, we are 40% female at the undergraduate level, and we do have a female president, Dr. Lori Lushin, who previously worked at NASA and was part of the team that designed the Mars Curiosity rover. So it is really cool to have her as a president. So what makes us stand out is that we are a project-based institution. So though we were founded in 1865, since about the 1970s, we have been purely project-based, meaning all of your courses, you will be doing projects with some large-scale projects in the later years. All of the later projects are sponsored. So you're going to be doing work for companies, for government agencies, for non-governmental organizations. And those are during the school year that count as classes at WPI. So they could be on our campus, or you could be in Copenhagen, you could be in Campinas, Brazil, you could be in Sydney, Australia. So they are all over the world, giving you an opportunity to see what it's like to work elsewhere while you are a WPI student. Of course, you're wondering, what are you studying? You said STEM and you said business. Our most popular major is computer science. After that, it is mechanical engineering, biomedical engineering, and robotics engineering. We're actually the first in the United States to offer robotics engineering as an undergraduate degree, currently the only one to offer it as bachelor's, master's, and PhD. So you can come with us for the 4 years of undergrad, you can stay longer, you can do your master's at the same time as your undergrad, and our students are super involved, love working in groups, love being creative, though they are STEM students. So it is a fun and active campus.
Thank you very much, Vera. Thank you very much, all of you. And I don't know, Alfredo, which he's in charge of the Q&A section. I don't know if we have any further questions from the audience.
Yes, we have some questions here. Some we have. Okay, we have time. Okay, I have the first one. If I was an average student during high school, but my exam score is great, this is going to help me to send the results?
I don't know who would like to answer that.
It's an open question.
Yes.
So I can go ahead and start. For Loyola, we are test optional, and that is a scenario where you would want to, if you have a college counselor or guidance counselor in your high school, talk to them about it. If you're working with an Education USA office, talk to your Education USA advisor. And then again, think about the schools that you have in mind specifically for the application process. So don't just think about whether your score is impressive compared to other students in your high school, or if somebody else told you it was good. Look specifically at that middle 50% range of the test scores of successful students at the schools where you are applying. And in that case, if your score is looking great on those scales, you should send it in. That can help your application file. And that is one of the main reasons that schools stay test optional instead of going all the way test one, is to give students that opportunity. If they are in that situation where they're maybe their grades are a little bit lower, they struggled in a particular year, but they are able to show something new and something impressive in their application file through those SAT or ACT scores. Being test optional allows students that opportunity.
I would add to that, as we said before, we are looking at all parts of the application. So if you are concerned about a certain class or a certain year of schooling, there is going to be a part of the application where you can include additional information that you can share with the committee to explain maybe why that year didn't turn out as, or that particular class didn't turn out as you might like. There's also that opportunity for teachers or guidance counselors to submit a letter of recommendation. You might want to do some outreach to the teacher that was in charge of that particular class or that knew you that particular year, who could provide some more background. So there are many ways to sort of illuminate your potential to thrive and succeed on a college campus that don't necessarily require the SAT or the ACT to do that. So again, we're open to have that conversation with you in many cases, either on phone, on Zoom, just like we're doing today, or even in chat. Some folks even have WhatsApp accounts or numbers. If you feel more comfortable texting, that might be an option on a lot of campuses. So I agree with everything that Rachel shared and just wanted to add that as well.
Thank you. Okay, I have another
I'll
question
add one
here.
thing, even though I'm test blind. We look for the upward trend in grades. So, if you had a difficult year, how was the next year? So we want to see that you were able to, really recover from that.
Thank you. Okay, I have another question. If I am using the Common App, can I choose to send scores to some institutions, but not to others?
I can jump in on this one. So Binghamton only considers your SAT or ACT scores official if they're coming from the testing agency itself. So although the Common App and other application types, they do allow students to self-report scores, we don't really, our university doesn't consider those self-reported scores. So even if you self-reported an SAT or ACT on the Common App, and that same application is going out to many universities, each one is going to have their own policy on how they want to receive those scores.
Thank you.
As the test blind one, I get it. So if you're concerned that one school doesn't accept them, but it's on your common application, what's going to happen then? We have an internal way where we block them. So even if it's on your common application, I will never see it. So don't worry about that. The schools have their own processes built around their own policies.
I have another one here. If I was sick throughout my 5th grade, and I was born in the Caribbean, but my grades were not the best because of this, but I want to attend university, will that affect me into getting accepted?
Could you repeat the question? I heard a part of it. I heard if the student is sick, but that was born somewhere else.
Yeah, I think the main question is if I was sick throughout my 5th and 4th grade, I assume, I am from the Caribbean and my grades aren't the best, and I want to attend a university in the States. Will this situation may affect my acceptance?
I can start with this one. I think it ties a lot into what Tanya was saying earlier about how you have multiple ways to sort of share with the admissions committee any extenuating circumstances that could have affected your grades or your ability to participate in activities and anything along those lines. So if you did, if you were sick, please tell us, because if we don't know that and we see the lower grades, then we don't really have any context surrounding that, and we don't really know how to evaluate that situation. But if you do provide us with the context, whether it's you providing that information in the Common App, there's a section where you can just write any additional information that you want to share with the admissions committee. You could talk about it in a personal statement. You could also have a recommender mention it in a letter of recommendation, particularly if it's your counselor or somebody who knows you well and knew you well during that time when you were experiencing that situation. All of that can really help us to understand the context more, and that is something that we take into consideration when reviewing applications. If we see that you had a bad year but we understand why, that can really help us. And just like Vera was saying as well, if it's your earlier years, especially in high school, and then we see that you were able to bring your grades up after that, we do take those grade trends into consideration as well. So it's not going to count you out just because you had, a bad year or two, especially if you share why with us.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I have one last question. Are testing policies different for international students, either more flexible or harder, or are they the same for domestic and international students at your institutions?
So at Loyola University, Maryland, we have the same policy for admission for international students and for domestic students when it comes to SAT, ACT. So it's optional for any student who's applying. International students would still need to send a test of English.
Binghamton is the same. The testing policies are the same for domestic and international students.
Same thing at Pitt. We're test optional for everybody, obviously with the exception of international students being required to submit that English language proficiency test. I have heard of some institutions in certain states that are actually more flexible with international students though than they are with domestic students. I've heard of some colleges that require SAT or ACT still from domestic students, but not from international students. But that's a really good question to ask each school that you're interested in applying to.
Yeah, I think I've heard of schools being more flexible for international students, as in instead of the SAT, you can submit an AP score, things like that. But as we are test blind, nobody needs SAT and ACTs except for our international students do have to submit a form of English proficiency.
Thank you very much. Okay, Jorge, I'll leave it to you now.
Okay, thank you very much, Alfredo. I think we can move on to the next slide, please. And I think, yeah, it is their contact information. So guys, make sure to take a screenshot of it. As Tanya said, she's very approachable on WhatsApp as well. And but just for Vera, Caitlin, Rachel, and even Tanya, you can send an email to them. They will be super excited and super eager to answer your emails. So yeah, so I don't know. Well, in the meantime that you look at this slide, I'm just gonna. Okay, I don't know if we can move on to the next slide already. Okay, yeah. So once again, thank you very much, Rachel, Caitlin, Vera, and Tanya, for being with us today. This was very great to know about the different options that universities offer to international students. Well, I mean, domestic and international students, right? And since we have a lot of attendance from not only from Mexico, but also from the Caribbean and Central America, I think this information was very well considered. Okay, so remember, guys, we still have a lot of events. Tomorrow, we will have from our peers in Mexico City. The topic is understanding the types of undergraduate degree options, which kind of goes attached onto this session that we had today. And can we go to the previous one, please? Yeah, that one. Then on September 14, next week, we have another session, proving your English level test options, which kind of goes related into this session that we have as well. September 22nd, we have a roundtable session with panelists from other universities, although this goes directly from for graduate students. And on September 29, we will have applying early decision or early action. Are you ready? Well, I hope you are ready for this. So moving on to the next one, please, Elvira, which is the slide for the tomorrow's webinar from our peers in Mexico City. Don't miss this session. And then next one, please. So thank you very much once again, Rachel, Caitlin, Vera, Tanya. Thank you for attending this session, you guys. Thank you for the Education USA team, not only in Mexico, but in the Caribbean and Central America. Thank you for being here. And we look forward to see you tomorrow at the session we will have. Okay, thank you very much. Have a great evening, and we'll see you soon.
Bye. Thank you.